decimals. So we've talked about adding and subtracting, where we lined up our decimals and just brought it straight down. We talked about multiplying, where we did not have to line up our decimals. We counted how many places were after the decimal in the problem and matched it in the answer. And now we're doing dividing decimals, which doesn't do either of those. We don't have to line up our decimals because we actually don't put them in a line. We take the dividend, our first number, and it's being divided by the divisors. Remember, the first number is the one that goes inside the house, if you will. A lot of people think of this as a little house. And the second number is outside of it, like it got locked out because it got there second. Okay, so we got our dividend inside, our divisor outside. All right, so what matters is that the divisor is not a decimal. Divisor, the one outside, cannot be a decimal. So this is a decimal, so what do we do about it? All we have to do is slide the decimal point until it's no longer a decimal, so I slide it over and make it 3. I can't just change the divisor without changing the dividend. So since I slid it once, I'm going to go into the dividend and also slide that one once, okay? And then I'm going to bring that decimal point straight up to my little roof of my house, okay? So the answer is going to have the decimal point right there, okay? So let's write down what we just did. Slide decimal in the divisor until it's no longer a decimal, right? No longer a decimal. And then we're going to match it, do the same thing in the dividend. Then match the decimal movement in the dividend. So that's our what to remember to do, okay? We slide the decimal in the divisor, 0.3 till it becomes 3, and then we slide it the same number of times in the dividend, okay? And then we bring it out. Once we do that, we're ready to go, okay? So now just go ahead and divide. I'm doing 3 into 15, goes in 5 times, I subtract, I bring down my 2. 3 doesn't go into 2 at all, so don't forget to put in the 0 when it doesn't go into it at all. Then bring down the 1, finally, 3 goes into 21, 7 times, and that's my answer, 50.7. Okay. You can do estimation to figure out if you did it correctly. It's a little difficult on this one because if we round it, 0.3 becomes 0, and 15 divided by 0 is 0, so that's a little harder to figure out. You can try rounding it after you've slid the decimal points. Just make sure they both got slid once, right? We slid them both over once. So that's about 150. That's about 3. 150 divided by 3 is 50, okay? So if we estimate, we are correct, okay? Just double check that it moved over the same number of times on both the dividend and the divisor. All right, so let's try another one. So go ahead and pause it and try this one on your own, okay? Be careful that you put the right number as the dividend and the right number as the divisor. All right, so let's go ahead and check this. So remember, the first number got to the house first, so we got inside. The second number got locked out. Now, when we're looking at this, it's the number outside the divisor that cannot be a decimal. So I have to slide it over twice to make it a 3 again, another 3. Then I have to match it inside on the dividend. So I have to slide it over twice. Now, the problem is there's only one number to slide it past. So what do? Add a 0, okay? So anytime you need an extra number, you add a 0, those placeholder zeros. And then bring the decimal point straight up, okay? Now, as you're doing your division, be really careful that you're lining up all the place values correctly. Because if you're not, you can end up with the decimal point in the wrong spot. And at the very end there, don't forget to add that 0. It's not 46. You need to go all the way to that decimal point. So this answer is 460. Like I said before, we can do our rough estimation by sliding it twice. This would be around, let's see, 1380. I'm gonna make it a little easier, maybe make it 1400 divided by 3. Okay. If you want to make it even easier for yourself, if I want to round it to a number that's easily divisible by 3, I could think, hey, that's close to 1500, and 1500 divided by 3 is 500, very close to my 460, okay? So this whole checking process, the estimating, it's just something you can do mentally. Think of something that's close to it. You're just checking, am I close to the answer to make sure I'm doing it correctly, okay? So that's 460. All right, let's do another practice problem. So again, go ahead and pause it, do it. When you're done, hit play. All right, so you've done this one. So remember again, first number got to the house first. Can't forget my decimal point. Second number got locked out in the cold. And that second number cannot be a decimal, okay? So I need to slide it over, match it in this one, and bring it straight out. So once I've done all that, I can go ahead and start dividing. So 7 goes into 7 once. Goes into 1 no times. Bring down the 5, goes in twice for 14. And bring down the 4, goes into twice for 14 again. So 10.22 is my answer. Do a little check. I'm going to slide it over once, slide it over once. So that's 71.5, which could round to 72. But remember how I said you may want to round to numbers that are easy to divide. Because this is 7. This is close to 70. That's going to be easy mental math. 70 divided by 7 is 10. Very close to the answer I got, so that means I did it correctly, okay? So remember your whole checking process, the estimation, the rounding is very flexible. You're just trying to figure out, am I close, okay? It doesn't have to be an exact process. So 10.22 was my answer. All right, so let's practice a word problem again. Like I said before, this is all on division, so we know we're dividing, but let's look for the keywords to figure out how we would know it's dividing if we had a whole bunch of different problems mixed up. Okay, so Elsa is making cookies. Each batch requires 0.25 cups of flour, so each batch requires that. Elsa has 4.3 cups of flour. How many batches can she make? So the key words here, you're talking about each, right? But the problem is that also meant multiplication before. This time, what I'm thinking about is what's happening. She has a whole bunch of flour, and she wants to split it up, right? She wants to know how many batches can she make. How many times can she split up her 4.3 cups of flour? Whenever you're talking about splitting, that means divide, okay? And what are we splitting up? We're splitting up the flour that she has. We're splitting up the 4.3 into 0.25 batches, okay? So whatever is being split is the one that goes inside the house. This is probably the hardest part to know which one you're dividing by. Even if you know you're dividing, you're not sure which one goes in the house. Whatever's being split up goes in the house, okay? So now I need to do my division now that I have my problem set up. And so I need to slide this over twice to make it no longer a decimal. Slide this twice and add a 0 to fill that in. And now I'm going to go ahead and do my division. So 25 goes into 43 only once. Bring down my 0. So let's see, I can get up to 175 with 25s. I'm thinking of quarters. If you're American, that's a little easier. So let's see, 4 25s make 100. 3 more would get me up to 75. So that's 7 altogether. 7 times 25 is 175. Now, I have a remainder. We're not doing remainders anymore. We're going to keep going. We have this decimal point. We need to figure out, okay, well, what's after that decimal point? So down here, there's just endless zeros, right? I could use all of those if I want. So I'm going to bring one more down. 50 is pretty nice because it only goes in twice, and then I'm done. So I don't actually need all those extra zeros I wrote. I have my final answer, 17.2. And it's a word problem, so I need to make sure I write my units. So I got 17.2 batches. You could make a 0.2 of a batch. You'd have to do some math to figure out how much to add for everything else. But you may also just say 17 batches, okay? So 17 or 17.2 batches would be the answer. Again, you could do your estimation by rounding it maybe off to 400 and dividing by 25. So if I do 400 divided by 25 for my estimation, 25 goes into 100 4 times, and there's 4 400s, so that'd be 16 altogether, very close to my 17, so my answer must be correct. All right, so let's try a word problem on your own. So go ahead and pause it, read through it, figure out your answer, and then hit play to check how you did. All right, so George bought 7 magazines. The total was $24.99, but they all cost the same amount, so that part's important, that they all cost the same amount. How much was each magazine? So we're trying to figure out how much each magazine cost, okay? Before, each meant we were multiplying because we were trying to find the total. That's when you're multiplying. If you know how much each magazine costs, you're finding a total. Well, now we have the total, and I want to take that total, and I want to divide it to find out how much each one was, okay? So when you're talking about dividing, you're always going to divide the total by how many there were. The total was $24.99, so I'm dividing it by 7. In this problem, 7's already a whole number, so I don't need to slide anything. If the divisor outside the little house is a whole number, you don't need to slide that decimal. Just keep it where it was. It just comes straight out, and that's it. So let's go ahead and do our division. Let's see, we got 3 times, it goes into 24. And then 5 times for 39. And then 7 times for 49. That worked out quite nicely. I didn't have to go any further. If you had to, remember you could always add zeros and bring those down. But I didn't have to at this point. I get £3.57 for each magazine, okay? For each magazine. Don't forget your unit, what you're talking about. And again, you can do an estimation. $24.99 is obviously very close to 25. I might round it a little higher and go, well, 25 is very close to 28, which is easily divisible by 7. You get 4. And again, 357 is very close to 4. So remember with your check, it's fine to round it up to a number that's really easy to divide, okay? You don't have to make extra work for yourself. This can all be done mentally, this check, to make sure that your answer is correct.